Welcome, everyone. This is the Rotary eClub of Silicon Valley. You can join us every week to hear stories of innovation, entrepreneurship, and education as they relate to service and improving communities and making the world a better place for each and every one of us. And if that seems like a lofty goal, that's because it is. Now, what we're hoping to do every week is inspire you, to have people come on and talk to us about things that make our members and our guests stop and say, wow, this is something I can't wait to share. This is a fantastic idea. And to that end, we go and we find all of the most interesting people we possibly can, even Shags, who poses in the middle of this, and to tell those stories that allow everyone to stop and say, that's a fantastic idea. How can we take that further? If you're a visiting Rotarian, you might take these ideas and share them with your club. You're certainly welcome to share this meeting and this program with them as well. But to our meeting tonight, the program tonight is with Tariq Fancy. Now, Tariq is the founder of an organization called Rumie. And Rumie has kind of a small goal, which is sort of like, how do you educate about 1 billion kids, right? And we think that that's the kind of thing that gets us in the mood for saying, talk to us, right? Why are you doing this? What's the story behind this? How could this possibly be? Talk to us about innovation. So with that, I will allow Tariq to step in, give a little bit of background on himself, a little story about what he is doing, and then we will start peppering him with questions, and we are very happy that you are joining us. Tariq, welcome. It is good to have you.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here, and thanks for taking the time to hear what we're doing and sort of the whole story behind it. So I'll try to keep my talk to the allotted time because I tend to blab quite a long time, quite endlessly when I talk about this topic because it's something that excites me. And so I'll progress as such. I'll start a little bit about myself and kind of my philosophy of thinking of these things and how I ended up doing this, because my career path from kind of investment banker, sort of Wall Street guy, to doing this is not the most usual career path. And then I'll talk about what we've done so far in the last couple of years and the results we've had, and then kind of where we're going in the future, which I think is really exciting. So a bit about myself. I was born and raised in Canada. I've studied in 4 universities in 4 countries outside of Canada, so I did my undergrad in the States. Always had a passion for international development. Largely it's because of my family background. So my parents were born and raised in Kenya, and grandparents were born and raised there. They're originally of South Asian descent from the Indian subcontinent some 100-odd years ago. And when I was a kid, my dad worked for Air Canada, so I would travel a lot to Kenya, actually, a lot, because we had family still there. And I still remember this one story kind of sticks with me and the family where, I'd gone to a trip to Nairobi, and I was about 7 years old then, and I saw a beggar on the street. And, growing up in Toronto is a pretty nice place, and you don't tend to see that level of, or certainly not like that of a beggar. This guy was thin, he had spindly legs, he looked like, he was squatted over, so you wanted to help him up, but you almost got the sense that if you did, he would just fall again because his legs weren't capable of carrying his weight. And so I immediately went over to him. I was very young, and my inclination was to give him whatever I had in my pockets. And my uncle, who lived in Nairobi, spent his whole life there and is still there, stopped me and said, "Listen, forget it. There's too many of them. You can't help them all." And the funny thing is, for days afterwards, I kept nagging my parents and my relatives, my aunt and uncle and so on. And it's one of those things that only kids do, where I just kept saying, wait, I don't really get it. Just because I can't help everyone, why does it mean I shouldn't help that one guy? And there was no real answer, but I just kept nagging them about it. And it became a joke in the family. And oddly, that kind of encapsulates my view about development, which I then studied as an undergrad in the U.S. And that is that, you can't always come up with a perfect solution, but it doesn't mean that you can't come up with a pretty good one that can have an impact, a lot of impact for a lot of people at an affordable and practical price and in a practical way. And so I was always interested in education heavily because partly my mom's family, they were quite intelligent, had done quite well for themselves. But the smartest of all the siblings was one of my uncles who was misdiagnosed with illness when he was young and became very sick and was in a wheelchair. And this is or the school bus that would come around. Didn't receive a great chance to have access to an education, and he got by with what he could. But of course, the family was so many kids and so resource constrained, couldn't really drive him to school or take him every single day. And so he was someone who I always saw as having enormous potential to have impact in the world, but was never really given a chance to an education. And I've always viewed that as being, the fact that there are around 1 billion kids in the world who are underserved in education, some 50+ million who have no schooling at all, as being one of the biggest problems for humanity. Because no matter what your issue is, if it's climate change or it's human rights or any of these bigger problems that humanity faces, you almost think that if you could just solve the education problem and you had 1 billion more, brains that were operating at full capacity, the world would probably have the tools to solve a lot of these problems. But there's almost a lot of wastage and potential of people that are operating at 40 or 50% below in math and reading scores, or they just don't get access because of whatever reasons around them. So that was always a big passion area of mine. And about 10, 12 years ago, I worked on, I wanted to stay in development. I missed out on a big scholarship at the end of undergrad, and then I got sucked into investment banking, which is kind of a long story. I managed to emancipate myself from that later in life, but it turned out as something I was pretty good at, and I actually started off working in Silicon Valley back in 2001 in a tech banking group. There was a guy called Frank Quattrone who did all the big tech IPOs of the day, and I started my career in his group, and this is the group behind sort of the Google and Amazon and Cisco IPOs. And then in 2003 switched to a firm doing turnarounds investments in New York. And while I was there, I would always find ways to merge my passion for development with what I was doing. And in about 2003 or 2004, I led investments to bring mobile phones into emerging markets. And what really happened was that in developed countries, we all got basic mobile phones, like the Nokia kinds of, those really ones we wouldn't use now unless unless your other phone's all broke or you were a hipster and you were trying to be ironic or something. There's no really good reason to use it, but we all had them back then, and and around 2004 drove such scale manufacturing that the cost per handset plummeted towards $50. And I remember starting to think, well, this, the opportunity of mobile phones isn't really so much for us in North America or Western Europe, because it's great. It takes us from something good, landlines, to something great, mobile phones. It's really if you could use those to take 75% of humanity, or the majority of people around the world who don't have landlines, and give them from nothing to something great. And that leapfrog is one of the big success stories now in development, is that you have people all over Africa who didn't have landlines or good postal service or transportation, and now they're using mobile phones. And so I always felt really proud of that, because I was able to merge what I was doing with my passion for development. And a few years ago, I started, sort of thinking that I wanted to change my career and do something that I care more about. There's kind of a story behind that, which was my roommate in business school, with whom I did my MBA, contracted cancer. And when his cancer hit stage 4, he and I were very passionate about someday doing something in our areas of interest with social impact. And when you get to have stage 4 melanoma, that tends to accelerate quite quickly, because that the odds are difficult and it may be a matter of time. And so he founded a charity. Actually, he was Dutch. He founded a charity in Kenya, where of course my parents were born and raised. And that compelled me to sort of almost realize through living vicariously through him that I needed to do something that I really cared about. So that led to Rumie, and the idea behind the Roomie Initiative, or Rumie, is that the internet has brought about an enormous ability to an enormous amount of free learning tools online, and they're great for you and I. But the real opportunity is that we can deliver them to all these kids around the world who have never really received access before. And so I'll switch to a quick presentation, which I'm going to have to speed through because I'm, as I suspected, we're behind schedule. But I've given you kind of the genesis, a little bit of it. And so Rumie, our focus is simply this problem, that 1 billion kids around the world are underserved in education. And when we think about using innovation to solve the problem, I think the idea is really that we don't want to be like every other, or many charities which are sort of taking $1 and sending it to, let's say, Africa. Sort of fundraising and redistribution charities, in a way. That needs to exist, because if you give money, it can certainly go farther in these places, and it can have enormous impact. But my thought was that is never going to be enough money to solve a problem like this, right? I mean, no matter how much foreign aid goes and how much people give, this is a problem that's persisted for a long time. And so what we need to think about is not so much more dollars, but how to make, $1, way more efficient. And technology has that capability, because we started to realize that, well, wait a second, we may have crossed the Rubicon where it's cheaper to deliver bytes than books, right? And so I looked at a lot of these models, and people were sending textbooks to Africa, and I was thinking, well, in general, you can find a whole bunch of stuff online for free. In fact, anything you learn at the age of 18, you can figure out, or you can learn and find alternatives for free now online. We started out in 2013, and our simple idea was we took a low-cost tablet that we worked with manufacturing partners to develop. We put a ton of storage space on it, because storage space is really cheap, and we preloaded an entire curriculum of content working with a partner in Haiti, content that was relevant for those communities. And we realized that on one device, and this is $50 hardware, we had put enough storage space that we could store 32,000 books. If you took, A Tale of Two Cities is the average book length. We thought, well, and that has increased since then, of course. There's more storage space and devices and so on. And we thought, let's try using this in these communities. It can be charged cheaply with solar power. All the content's on it, so you actually don't need an internet connection live. It can work from anywhere, and it's a library for the cost of a book, right? And what we found was incredible, was that not only was it a cheaper way of providing access to content than trying to recreate libraries or whatever we had, in North America 10, 20 years ago, with encyclopedias on the wall that cost $1,000 and all the other things, was that we could leapfrog them not just to a digital solution, but one that seemed to be engaging students in really, really interesting ways. And across all of our deployments, and not only are we seeing tremendous impact in learning because we're using really good content that oftentimes is being proven to have statistical impact in North America, we're also finding that it has mental health benefits. It engages students more, and working with our partners, we've started to add little innovations around the edges. So, for example, gamification. So, kids do their exercises, and then they get playing time games unlocked. Another thing is that when they synchronize a device once or twice a month, or whenever they get an internet connection, we get analytics back. We can understand how they're using it in a way that you couldn't really understand with paper books. So we've started adding all these things, working with partners. And the story of what we did was, this is from Haiti, from our first deployment. We then started using it for Aboriginal education, actually right here in Canada. So we're based in both the US and Canada. We're a 501c3 in the US and a registered charity in Canada. And we found there was a need for Aboriginal education in Canada, just as, of course, there would be a need in the US. Maybe not in Silicon Valley, but certainly in the Mississippi Bayou or West Appalachia or wherever else. And this is in South Africa. We did stuff in Liberia a year ago during the Ebola crisis. So the government closed all the schools to prevent transmission of the disease, and we were already running a program with a partner there. And what's interesting is if you work with very resourceful partners, and we work with partners in every single country, so we never actually deploy directly. We focus on the technology aspect that needs someone to specialize in it, but our local partners will always do the delivery. They actually reposition the devices to be used in the communities. So it's sort of like, if the kid can't go to the library, then the library can come to the kids. And it was a great ad hoc solution when there was a humanitarian crisis. And we found all kinds of examples, both data and hardcore statistics, but also anecdotal. So here's a kid, Marcus, who became so interested in the device and in engineering that he ended up teaching other kids about it, taking a lead, and finding motivation far more than he had prior to that, using whatever paper alternatives they could afford. Because whereas we tend to be spoiled by seeing LCD screens in in a local Starbucks or McDonald's, and the screen is changing to show you the menu, they're not as used to seeing these things. So it ignites a sort of creativity in them, particularly we found actually for science and technology, that we wouldn't have expected. And so what we've done is we've found that we've been working with partners, we've grown it around the world, and that's where we've come in the last 2 years. And I'll now talk for a couple minutes to finish off about where we're going with it, which I think is actually the most exciting thing. Is that we found that, and a whole bunch of people started saying nice things about us. I'll fly through these slides real quick. But we found that we knew we could deliver content and we could do it way better than anywhere else. But we needed to then provide structure, because we could provide structure, then we could take it to the next level. And because kids here, they don't just have a library, although providing a library is great. They actually have more than that. They have lesson paths and curriculum and guidance and all the structure that is a true educational system. And if we could provide all that, we could empower local educators that exist in all these places. And so we developed something called the Roomie LearnCloud. We've been working on that through the course of this year. And it's a way that we can effectively give people around the world who care about education a way to help us organize, sort, and deliver the content that needs to be used in these communities. Because we figured out we could do the technology aspect and the hardware, but to truly organize content across all subject areas that could be useful, across languages, because you need to sometimes use it in local languages and in useful ways for that culture, that was a gargantuan task that you couldn't do with 10 or 20 people. You'd need like 10 or 20,000. But being a nonprofit and seeing how Wikipedia and other organizations were able to build movements around social causes that people really cared about, we thought maybe there's a way to do that too. And so we're actually testing that right now today with a campaign we've just launched for Syrian refugees. And if the discourse in North America around Syrian refugees has unfortunately turned quite negative in the last few weeks, but in general, since the beginning, it's tended to be mainly about migrants, right? It's about people coming here to North America and resettling. And without even taking a view on that, I think what's interesting to notice is that if you look at the numbers, the vast majority of the kids in these refugee camps are not actually going to be able to come and resettle in North America or in Western Europe. I mean, the long-term solution for the country of Syria is not that they all move to Germany. It's that 97% of them are going to stay in those camps, and it's either because they can't resettle elsewhere or because they actually don't want to, right? They want to rebuild their country, and they've been waiting for and hoping for a while that the hostilities will die down, and unfortunately haven't. And so you have millions of kids in camps that look like they may be a lost generation because they have limited access to education, and yet they will be the ones someday who will have to rebuild their country. And so we're running a campaign around both allowing people to sponsor devices, additional devices that are being used in these camps. So if anyone gives $50, all of it, we do a 100% model. All of it goes to the field, so it sponsors additional device. We did something very similar for Liberia last year during the Ebola crisis, and went very well, and we had to triple our original goal. But what the additional twist we've added this year for the Syrian refugee problem is that we said, well, there's all this content that our partners need, that they want to teach the kids. It spans English, Arabic, and Turkish, because a lot of them are on the Turkish border. And let's engage teacher communities and, frankly, skilled volunteers across the board to come in and give their time, right? Because every other NGO that says if you want, says look, if you want to have impact in these communities, they have nice pictures and stories, and they'll say, give us money, open your wallet at the end of the day. And we're saying, you know what, you can give money if that's your thing, but if you don't have as much money but you have skills and time to give, come and give that too. And we've had, I'll finish off just by saying that, universities are organizing hackathons. So George Washington University in DC did one this past weekend. We have ones being organized in the Netherlands and here in Canada, as well as one in Cairo. And we're finding that teacher communities, student communities are really, really engaged around the ability to sit from their pajamas at home or at local hackathons, whatever makes sense, and have impact in communities far, far away from them through the use of technology. So I'll leave you with that because I'm a notch over time, but I think I just wanted to give you a sense of kind of who I am and where I've kind of come and how we got to Rumie, what we've done in the last couple of years, and really what excites me the most about what we're going to do going forward. There we go. Wow.
Shag's in the house. So excellent, Tariq. I mean, I love the vision for this, and this in part because it kind of runs along the lines of stuff that's important to me professionally as well. We're going to take some time to kind of load up some comments and questions. I'm gonna introduce the other people that we've got in the room. So our membership chair, Shags Chagrin, is with us, as is
fabulous program.
Say it again, Shags.
Fabulous program.
Definitely.
Be reaching out, and the whole thing about if you're Muslim or you're Christian, people need help.
Absolutely.
Help them.
Absolutely. And then also in the room is Gene Tugnetti, who is our member who connected with Tariq in order to get him to be a speaker at our club. So Gene, thanks for that. And Gene, I'll let you kind of start things off with a comment or question.
So yeah, great presentation, Tariq. Love hearing it even more detail today. Wondering, what do you overall? What's the biggest obstacle you face in making this grand vision happen? What would you say number one on the list is?
You know, I hate to say it, but one of the biggest challenges is probably fundraising, and I'll tell you why it is. It's well, it's one we've managed to crack, but to really, you know, have the impact we want, we would need to do it a little bit better. And the challenge that I found is that I spent my entire career in the for-profit side of things, and what I found was that there's a lot of capital in the for-profit side that backs startups. And they back, I mean, obviously you guys know this sitting where you are better than anyone else, but they back startups because they know that, you know, normal businesses will only pursue incremental change. But if you truly want revolutionary change or disruptive change, you need to take risk. You need to have risk capital. And you know, venture capitalists or angels know that, you know, this is not like a debt portfolio, right? Like, you know, it's the opposite of one. You might invest in 10 things and 8 of them lose money or zeros, but 2 of them are home runs. What I've tended to find is that in the nonprofit space, there's not a lot of risk capital around you know, taking, you know, all the big foundations talk about you know, hey, we love innovation, you know, that's great, and then they'll ask you to apply for funding from like USAID, and then you go to like USAID's website and it's like you need 5 years of audited financials to apply. Like they'll have a heavy bias against the fact that you haven't existed for a while, which actually ought to be a strength in terms of innovation. So we started out and financed ourselves because, I mean, number one, I've never taken $1 salary, and I work like investment banking analyst hours on this, but it's something I'm very passionate about. And then I pulled in I was able to use my network, and we pulled in a bunch of CEOs who were really passionate about it. So the CEO of TD Bank Group, based out of Canada, but now TD is obviously in the US also. It's a $100 billion company. He's personally involved and sits on the board, and has written a big check, and a bunch of other ones. And people, you know, they look at us and say, wow, that's great. You have some real, you know, amazing backers, and how do you do it? And I think to myself, listen, it's not like we wanted that. It was that they were the only guys who actually could say, you know what, we get it, and we're willing to take a risk on, you know, we're going to get a charity receipt either way, but this is something that could move the needle. You know, because the big organizations, they will get to funding us down the line, but I find it's very difficult to convince them in the beginning, because they'll ask you for a long-term impact study when, you know, you couldn't possibly have that because you haven't existed for the long term. That's challenge number one, I would say. I'd say the second, and that's a little bit of the harder challenge, but I think we're getting a hang on that. The second one is building a movement of people online, which, you know, we're starting to focus on, to organize the content effectively in a way that it's really useful in all the languages people need it. Because the delivery, amazingly, is going to be figured out for us. I mean, we have our own tablets and we use them, and that's how we've figured out the recipe of what works, and we're understanding impact and data. But what excites me the most is that we don't need to get the devices out there to get to 1 billion people. The 1 billion people model is based around, frankly, around smartphones. So I'd worked on basic mobile phones 10, 12 years ago. You could see the beginning of this wave where they were going to be all over in over 5 years, and leapfrog. We're at the beginning of that trend right now for smartphones. And so the GSM Association projects that by 2020, the number of smartphones in the world will be 5.9 billion. 80% of those will be in emerging markets. And the second someone gets a device like this, you know, they can receive rich content, PDFs, videos, apps. And what we're trying to do with the LearnCloud is build an enormous open repository of 100% free learning content, organized effectively into lesson paths across different areas, that you can deliver to anyone on their own device with an app. And it's not even just basic educational stuff, it's trade skills. It's like you could learn to be a plumber online for free today. You know, the NAHB, National Association of Home Builders, puts out stuff on home building. You know, we all probably take it for granted unless we have for any particular reason to look it up. But if you look at youth unemployment in Ghana, you know, if you had someone who has a smartphone, and the cheapest smartphone we're seeing now is below $50, so that's that magical point where it takes off. This is really useful, really, really useful stuff. So I'm very excited about where the world is going, because the trends are very, very strong.
Good. Okay. Thanks.
Oh, look, I got joined by my dog, who just broke in the room and is looking for food. Sorry about that.
No, not a problem. I mean, it's pretty much all about the animals. So
Yeah, exactly.
I'm good with that.
He's one of our biggest supporters.
There you go.
There you
Oh,
go.
yeah.
I'll get him on there.
Yeah,
All
excellent.
Yeah.
Shags is probably finding trouble to join in.
Actually, this is Izzy. This is my daughter's dog, Izzy.
Oh wow. He'll yeah. Well, he's if they're in the same room, he would be going nuts. But anyway.
Awesome.
Oh, there he is.
So Truffle's on the way, and as soon as we've got the Truffle moment.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
Maybe
Truffle.
2000.
How old is he?
4 years.
Oh.
Okay,
This beast is 9 months old, although he doesn't really look like it.
Oh my God, that's huge.
Yeah, he's a half husky, half border collie. Well, we don't know about the border collie; it's a rescue, but we think the other half's border collie. Sorry for that dog detour.
Jeff trinkets are as big as him.
Dog detours happen, and that's not a problem. So when we think about getting content organized, I mean, I'm trying to kind of get into the structure side of this. You mentioned this as we were talking about this. Getting content is not a problem. And by the way, my nonprofit actually has a library of 1,600 educational videos of 5 minutes or less. That it's all Creative Commons licensed stuff, and so I'll connect with you on that if that's stuff you want to add to what you got.
That needs to be on the LearnCloud because all of our NGO partners use the LearnCloud to pick what they want on their devices and to find free content. So that's exactly the kind of content we need.
Cool. Yeah, we're getting ready to start a project related to learning simple English, right? Because there's not a lot of Learn English for free videos out there, and we're thinking, working with several schools in Canada, as a matter of fact, we could probably get several hundred videos together in the coming 6 months or so. That's what we're hoping to make happen. But
we should definitely do that. And a quick detour. This is really interesting. So one thing that we're really focused on is we want our partners to tell us what they want, right? So now we're working with 15 partners and we're launching in the 15th country soon. And we want to pretty much the lean startup model, talk to our users and build our product based on what they're telling us they want. What's really interesting is that we originally thought they would really want basic educational content that we would at a certain age level, 8 to 12 years old, or math, and they would want to learn advanced calculus, and they'd want to learn sort of basic philosophy. Actually, the two areas that most of our partners and the community are telling us they really want, and this is from India to 6 or 7 countries in Africa, are learning English and trade skills, vocational skills. And the reason we believe that we're seeing that is that those are the two areas where they can most clearly draw a line to job prospects and economic benefits, right? Is that if you speak English in India fluently, controlling for everything else, you have 34% higher wages as a man and 22% if you're a woman. Just because you speak English, controlling for everything else, your age level, your level of education, everything else. That link is seen in many countries around the world. And trade skills, it goes without saying. I mean, a lot of communities, we want them to be learning, basic philosophy and all these things, but they'll need some component that the parents and the community sees will put food on the table effectively, because they have less disposable income and less room for error on that kind of thing. So that's learning English content is very, very important.
Well, when you think about, for example, the skills, the employability skills, right? When we look at that, it hits a certain kind of sweet spot, because if that's something that is demanded of kind of client groups and things like this in different parts of the world where things are developing, that same demand is there in the developed world. Like the average middle schooler in the United States can name about 8 professions, and finding out that there are people who do things like, their job is to pilot an underwater remotely controlled vehicle for science research. Suddenly they're much more interested in science and math than they were before. We have about 100 videos on our site just about different careers, right? The idea was to come down to these 4 questions, right? What's your job title? What does a typical day look like? What kind of education or training did it take to get the position? And what do you love about your work? Boom, right? And we had kids and teachers kind of making videos for a project like that. And I kind of think that as we begin looking at this, if you're able to kind of solve that structure issue of, okay, now that then we bring all these different content, kind of pieces together from all of these different providers, and being able to give people a bit of a path, it may be that a group like credible.org, I think it is, Credible is kind of built to design to help people show what they can do even in the absence of like a formal diploma or formal certificate or something like that. So there's a lot of possibilities out there. It might be that some of these things can be attached to what's happening with ck12.org, which you're probably familiar with.
They produce fantastic content. So these are the kinds of sources actually that we use and that we look for, right? And there's so many of them that the challenge is sometimes organizing and helping people find and use them together effectively. But the potential is that if you can produce effective lesson paths and learning resources across the board, or even in a sense a wiki school, right? A curriculum comprises of free materials that are digital, you massively lower the economic barriers to education. So.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I'm beginning to think that what we need to do is get you back to speak again in a few months, so that we can talk about, kind of the learning path through the program with the students or with kids in the Ebola areas, and then the learning path, to date with the kids in the refugee camps. Because, I just can't imagine that we can do anything better for the world right now than to make sure that we can improve the lives of people who are fleeing the kind of terror that we're seeing in all kinds of. I mean, to our viewers, we are recording this about a week and a half after the Paris attacks, and with the kind of discussion going on about Syrian refugees, there's a lot of room for people to start talking about hope and how do we provide hope. And this is exactly what we want to do with it: is share ideas like what Tariq is doing with Rumie. So Tariq, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to have you give us the final word here in a minute. I'm going to kind of close our time down because we're kind of at that point with kind of my standard comments, and then you can toss in like whatever you want to on there, and that'll be our kind of final thought. So everyone who has visited, our members and our guests, thank you for joining us. We are always happy to have you at the Rotary eClub of Silicon Valley at siliconvalleyrotary.com. And we hope that you will kind of join in each week and see what kind of things we're talking about. You'll note, for example, that you can talk about it further with what's going on a little farther down the screen, right? So if you go, after you've finished watching this program, you'll go down a little bit, you'll see the I attended survey, which you got to fill out. Let us know you're here so we can send you notes saying thanks. And then also, a little farther down, you're going to find that there is a place for the discuss system, the ISQUS. And in that system, you can talk about what you're seeing here, questions that you have about what was presented, all the different kind of things that were a part of the meeting. And we want you to, engage with what's going on. So talk to us with that. And then finally, visiting Rotarians, by having filled out that I attended form, you will get an email that you can pass along to your club secretary, so that if you are making up a missed meeting in your club, you'll have the paperwork, I guess we'll call it, to allow you to do that. So with that, I thank everyone for joining us. I want to hand it over to Tariq to finish things off.
Great, thanks. And I'm going to actually build off what you had said last. I think that would love to come back and give some follow-up on the Syria campaign. In the past, we, despite being a 501c3, had actually never even taken donations beyond the Liberia campaign last year and the Syria one this year. And that's because we just hadn't built the infrastructure even around it. We wanted to first get what we were doing to a point that we were really comfortable about it, and be able to offer people the opportunity to give money and have none of it go to us. It just goes straight to the field. But what's really interesting about this campaign is that people can also give their time and their skills, and we really want to build an online movement of people. So if you care about the future of Syrian refugees and probably the world indirectly, please go to learnsyria.org and get involved. We'd love to hear from you. You can message us through the site. You can give suggestions, feedback. If you know teachers or other people who want to get involved, please spread the word. I think together through technology, it's finally possible to do some really amazing things around the world. And I think this will be an early example of really volunteerism and service that's being done through technology that's having impact far, far away. So join us.
Perfect. Well said. Thanks again, and for everyone who has joined us, we hope to see you again next week at siliconvalleyrotary.com. Thanks again.
Thanks, Tariq.
Thank you.